Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Global Kids Census Sunday. Today we have a very special guest, Senator Julia Salazar. We are so excited to talk with her today. I'd like to welcome you. My name is Evie Hanzopoulos. I'm the Executive Director for Global Kids, and our mission is to educate, activate, and inspire youth from underserved communities to take action on critical issues facing our world. So one of the issues that our Global Kids leaders have been working on this year is the census. And, they started off doing in-person presentations and workshops. And of course, because of COVID-19, they have shifted to doing events online. They've created videos, they've done tweet chats, all sorts of things. And one of the things that they've decided to do is have these Census Sundays with elected officials who represent them or the schools that they attend. So we welcome you. We're excited to have the senator here today. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our two fantastic Global Kids leaders who attend Transit Tech High School in East New York. I'm going to grab my coffee, which is a little cold. We had some technical difficulties today, but we are ready to go. So take it away, Nemias and Bethrin.
Hi, thank you for joining Census Sundays with Global Kids. My name is Nemias Diaz Morera, and I'm in 11th grade at Transit Tech High School in Brooklyn and a member of Global Kids Census Squad.
Hi, I'm Bethrin Yahoo. I'm a student in 11th grade at Transit Tech High School and a member of Global Kids Census Squad.
Global Kids is one of the hundreds of community-based organizations in New York City that is working to spread the word of the 2020 census.
The 2020 census is a national count of all people living in the United States that happens every 10 years and determines how over $675 billion are spent across the U.S.
As stated earlier, our census squad is working to spread the word about the 2020 census and encouraging people to fill it out. But because of COVID-19, we got to do it online.
So if you're ready to complete the census, let us know by dropping a smiley face and emoji.
Okay, we're excited to be here today with New York State Senator Julia Salazar, who represents District 18 of New York State.
Today, we are going to learn a little bit about New York government and how the census count impacts our state finances.
Senator Julia Salazar, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, you represent the 18th District of New York State Senate, which includes Brooklyn neighborhoods such as Bushwick, Cypress Hills, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, as well as parts of Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, and East New York.
Also, Senator Salazar is a strong supporter of tenant rights, criminal justice reform, equal protection for women, and immigration justice.
Senator Salazar also co-sponsored the historic New York State DREAM Act and the Green Light Bill, granting access to New York State driver's license to those regardless of immigration status.
Thank you, Senator Salazar, for being here with us today.
Before we talk about the census, oh, my bad.
Not at all. Okay.
Okay, so before we talk about the census, let's learn about a little bit of what you do in the New York State Senate. So we know that Albany is the capital of New York State, and many decisions are made there which affect our everyday lives. Could you tell us a little bit about Albany and how laws are passed over there and what the Assembly does?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this today. I'm really excited to talk about the census. Again, my name is Julia Salazar, and my district in North Brooklyn includes Transit Tech. It's really cool to get to collaborate with you all. I live in Cypress Hills, and that's where I am right now. Given the public health crisis, my colleagues and I are currently working remotely, but under ordinary circumstances, I would be in Albany right now because the legislative session runs from typically from January till June. And during that time, we spend about half of our time in Albany, and then the other half of our time in our districts, just spending time with our constituents, doing work like this, meeting with constituents, and just working together with the community to try to then, when we return to Albany, bring their voices and allow it to inform the policies that we pass in the state legislature. So there are two houses in the state legislature. There's the state assembly and the state Senate. There are 63 members in the state Senate, 63 seats. So my district is one of them. Spanning across the state, most of us represent roughly 340,000 people in each of our districts, and but we are truly working together to represent all New Yorkers, because the policies that we pass, some that you mentioned, such as the DREAM Act, such as the green light legislation that finally restored the right to seek a driver's license for people regardless of their immigration status. Those laws, of course, affect people all over the state and not just in our respective districts. And we, normally we would be convening in Albany right now, conferencing together, introducing legislation, which we are still able to do remotely, and I've been doing, debating it, discussing it. Anything that is going to become law has to pass through both houses with majority support of the legislature, and then it has to be signed by the governor in order to become law. So that's like a very basic summary of what we typically do in the state legislature.
Great. Can you tell us a bit about an issue area of law that you're working on and how that affects our communities?
Definitely. I'll talk about a couple of things. Another thing that we do in the state legislature is we often host legislative hearings, public hearings, which are an opportunity for us to bring in experts or people with experience related to a specific issue, to inform the policy work that we're doing. Tomorrow, for example, I'm co-chairing a hearing on racial disparities and the impact of COVID-19 on our communities, because as all of you may know, we have actually seen a disproportionate impact and a disproportionately high rate of people testing positive for the virus, and even unfortunately dying from the virus in communities of color. The highest disproportionate rate being Latinos, and second highest being Black New Yorkers, and so forth. And so we are holding this hearing to try to identify the specific causes for why, and we could probably speculate reasonably on this call together, why communities of color, just as communities of color are often at risk for an undercount in the census, are also at higher risk for public health issues, right? And it has to do with resources. These issues are actually really closely related, and we can talk more about that. But that's part of our role, is to hold these public hearings. As far as legislation that I'm working on right now, I recently introduced a bill called the Relief for All bill, which seeks to provide economic relief for tenants, renters, for commercial tenants or small business owners, for small homeowners who are unable to pay their mortgage right now, or who are losing rental income due to their tenants not being able to pay rent. Basically trying to offer a comprehensive economic solution to the things that people are struggling with financially because of this crisis that we're all dealing with right now.
All right. So we know that something that deeply affected the communities was the count of every person that lives in the United States. So since we're in the middle of the 2020 census, do you think you could share with us what the self-response rate would be in your district, and how does this compare to the state and national averages?
Yeah, so while I'm not sure what the national average is, I do know that right now in New York State, only about 47% of New Yorkers have completed the census form for their household. So obviously that's far from the ideal, the goal of having us having 100% census participation. And in my neighborhood, specifically in Cypress Hills, that percentage of participation is even lower. It's more like 37%, and that's probably comparable to East New York, given that we're sort of part of the same immediate larger area. It's just really important that we increase that number by the time the census data collection ends in August, because as of right now, you know, if we were to end the collection of data for the 2020 census tomorrow, then we would essentially only have 37% or 47%, you know, at state level of our communities represented at the federal level.
What do you think some of the barriers that prevent our communities from being counted?
So there are a lot of different factors that go into determining if a community is a so-called hard to count community. One of the biggest factors is language barriers. So for communities where a lot of people speak a first language, or maybe even only speak a language that is other than English, or they speak a language that is not frequently used at the national scale or even across the state, those communities are often harder to count. Additionally, mixed households or intergenerational households, sometimes families have a hard time receiving their census form, or they're unaware that they need to include kids in the census. Even infants, you know, babies need to be included in the census, but many people don't realize that. You know, I think a lot of communities have not received the outreach that is absolutely necessary in order for us to get a full count. And then additionally, we had this unique challenge in the past year where the federal government was pushing to include a citizenship question on the census. And for those of us who are educated about the census, we know that it is completely safe and secure to complete the census, but not everybody knows that. And so the threat of including a citizenship question is another potential barrier for people who aren't citizens or who are concerned about the sensitivity of their immigration status. Thankfully, we were able to ensure that the citizenship question is not included on the census, but we know that it still potentially has the impact of creating fear among communities like ours, where a lot of people are undocumented, and we're already facing the challenges of hard to count communities. And the only other thing I want to mention, per your previous question, is that when our state, New York State, has a lower rate of participation in the census, what we really risk is having insufficient representation, right? We saw in 2010, the last complete census, that because so few comparatively New Yorkers completed the census forms, we actually lost congressional seat. And we are at risk of losing additional congressional seats after 2020 if there is an undercount again, like there was in 2010. And so it's really important that all of us participate in the census so that we have the representation that we deserve at the federal level.
Okay, thank you for that. So like with everything that you just mentioned, do you think the COVID-19 is having some sort of effect in the count for New York City in particular?
Absolutely. Due to the spread of the virus, people are necessarily sheltering in place, and a lot of people are wary of, because of social distancing, they're wary of answering the door for someone they don't know. They are less likely to participate in in-person census outreach events. A lot of people who might want to participate in virtual events or fill out the census online don't have reliable internet access at home. So that's not necessarily an option for them. And so even though the Census Bureau has really tried to make the census as accessible as possible, giving people the option of completing it by mail, completing it over the phone, or very quickly completing the questionnaire online, not all three of these options can be challenging to any given household right now. And so I definitely think that is in part a cause of the undercount that we're seeing right now, but it isn't a challenge that we're not able to overcome. Community organizations like Global Kids and others are really prioritizing census outreach and shifting it to digital, but then also safely able to continue the in-person outreach in ways that are compliant with social distancing and don't further risk the spread of the virus.
Thank you for that. And speaking of like with Global Kids and whatnot, we actually were originally intending to do like some sort of like pop-up events where we can help people spread, like where we can help spread the word of the Census 2020, but then the pandemic hit and then now we got to shift everything online. So yeah, so I'm going to shift the next question to Bethrin. So yeah.
Thank you, Nemius. So what do you think are the services that are affected by the census count?
A lot of the census count affects almost every area of our lives. It really determines the funding and support that we get from the federal government. So in addition to determining how many representatives we get proportionally in Congress, it determines funding from the federal government for our public schools. It determines funding for childcare, for for Medicaid, right? For our healthcare services. It determines, that the data is used to determine how different demographics are represented in a community. So if there are services that are uniquely essential to certain demographics, races, ethnicities, languages spoken, those services and the census ability to measure how many people need those services, it's really essential in order for everyone who needs those services to actually receive the support that they need.
All right, thank you. So yeah, we know that the census is being undercounted in New York City because of the fear of census information the fear that census information would be spread with other government agencies. So just to backtrack a little bit, what would you say to people who might be concerned with that their information would be spread to other agencies?
Yeah, it's really important to address this concern because it's understandable why people, whether they are just concerned about privacy and sensitive information in general, or concerned about their safety, or they are concerned about their immigration status being shared with the federal government. It's important that I think that we recognize those fears, even as we also inform people that there is virtually no risk that their information will be shared. It would be completely unprecedented for someone's personal information to be compromised or shared with any agency other than the Census Bureau, at least their personal identifiable information, right? It's never happened before, but additionally, there are safeguards in place to make sure that their information isn't shared with other agencies. And just one of those safeguards is that it's a federal crime for anyone in the Census Bureau to share information unlawfully with another agency or to compromise anybody's personal information. And a federal crime is really, it carries a very severe penalty. And so there is a very, very strong incentive for everyone at the Census Bureau to take this really seriously and while we recognize the fears that people may naturally have, they're not based in anything that's happened historically, and they're not based in facts.
All right, thank you. I did remember hearing once from Global Kids themselves that the census information is not allowed to be shared with government agencies. I was literally about to ask a follow-up question for that, but then you answered it, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, thank you. So since the pandemic is going on and the COVID-19 is spreading, do you have any ideas on how we can share information about the census with our neighbors and friends while we are practicing social distancing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's wonderful that you all are already proactively doing this by transferring your census outreach to digital outreach, right? This is a really powerful way of reaching as many people quickly and efficiently by sharing the information through videos, through events, virtual events like this one, by publishing the information about it online and making sure that people are able to not only learn about the census online, but also complete the census online, and that it's a really short process to do. I completed the census form for my household, and it only took me a few minutes, like less than 5 minutes, to submit it. I think that there are still ways for us to inform people about the census in more conventional ways. So considering the places that people go on a daily basis, it's completely okay, and I think recommended really that we share information with people about the census in public places where they would ordinarily go. It could be the grocery store, it could be near public transit, and right now it's really important that, of course, when we're in public, we are wearing masks, we are making sure to maintain distance, but we're still able to communicate with each other. And then of course there's the option of calling people's homes, and the Census Bureau is doing that as well. For anybody who wants to become more involved in census outreach, they can learn more about it, not only through you all and Global Kids, but also from the census website.
All right, thank you, Senator Salazar, for this great information. Lastly, do you have anything that you want to share with Global Kids or any of our friends tuning in on Facebook?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just deeply appreciate the work that you all are doing. It makes a profound difference when young people are reaching out to your peers, and making sure that they know, and their parents know, and their families know about the census, because this really has such a profound effect on all of us. I am thinking about how I actually first learned about Global Kids when I was visiting Transit Tech, when I was already in the legislature, but just visiting, and how the census really determines if schools like Transit Tech get the resources that you need, right? It's really what has demonstrated for me how important the census is considering that in 2010, only about 1 in 4 Black women in Brooklyn, for example, were actually counted in the census, right? And what that really means is that for Black women in Brooklyn, they only received 25% of the resources that they're entitled to, right? And that's 25% of the public school funding. It's 25% of the Medicaid funding, and that isn't right, and it's so simple, but we really all have a responsibility to work together in order to make sure that we get a full count, and the communities that each of us respectively come from have the most to gain, and also the most at risk if there's an undercount. So I just really commend you all for continue, for not giving up due to the public health crisis, and for continuing your outreach, because even under the current circumstances. If anything, the census is more important than ever because, as we all know, our communities are struggling due to COVID-19, and we're really going to need that additional support from the federal government once we defeat the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Senator Salazar, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. We encourage everyone to complete the census at my2020census.gov.